Welcome back to AM Live, and today we are hosting the Election Observation Group National Coordinator, Mulle Musau. He is in the building, and he represents civil society organizations that have been watching keenly the process of the election preparedness ahead of the August 9th big day. And on July 22nd, they had some concerns to raise, and I'm sure he has even more, having observed the developments over the last week or two in terms of the back and forth between the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and the police. And the IEBC has, since the incident of the arrest of foreigners, Venezuelans to be exact, who are said to be employees of the Smartmatic company, international company that is dealing with the IT aspect of the election process. They were arrested at the JKI on July 21st, that's Thursday, at the JKI airport with election material. Now we have, found out that there are stickers that were to be used to identify or to be labeled on the Kim's kits, and that kicked up a storm for many in the last few weeks or days, and so we want to start with that in terms of how this has played out perception-wise. And Kevin Mutai did this story on the 24th of this month and had a sit-down with a former IEBC or Electoral Commission commissioner on how he sees this playing out on the electoral integrity and the reassurance, if any, for the electorate.
The trouble witnessed within the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission just 2 weeks to the polls has raised a red flag, putting IEBC in a tight spot over its level of preparedness to carry out the election.
It is very unfortunate that it's coming up at this time, because our expectation is that at this 11th hour, what the voter in Kenya is interested in is to know how ready IEBC is in conducting the election that is due. We want to know whether the register is in place. It is from the sweeper down there to Chepkati up there. He has to bring all these people and make them realize that they have a responsibility to Wanjiku, and they have to deliver this election if this country has to move to the next stage. If it fails, and I've said many times, if we do anything wrong, it is going to be very unfortunate, because the country is sadly very badly divided.
But the recent spat between security and IEBC officials surrounding the arrest of 3 Venezuelans at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport who had sensitive election materials in their possession has also exposed the underbelly of the electoral agency. This has raised concerns about the installation of the technology required for the election and fears over claims of rigging the polls. The Commission has been accused of delving into secrecy in how it handles the elections management.
Chepkati is in command. And if he's in command, let them come up and discuss this matter and give the public what is right. It is not good for the country for our leaders to appear quarreling in public, especially over such a sensitive matter. It just sends a wrong signal. And there is nothing as dangerous as going forward for elections when the public, when political parties, when political leaders don't have confidence in the Electoral Commission.
This is also seen to be the cause of division among the commissioners who are not speaking with one voice.
I'll also urge the commissioners, today, as we head for the election in the next 2 weeks, to forget about their personal differences, to forget about whoever may have been their godfather in being appointed commissioners, and focus on the country. Because their differences, although they may look at it locally, can lead into the problem that we had in 2007.
Tumwa is advising IEBC to bridge the existing gaps and work towards ensuring that the Commission gains public confidence and trust as the country prepares for the election.
What the chairman should do is to get together with his team, look at exactly what happened. The team spirit is required today more than ever before. so that they can come up and tell us, yes, perhaps this information came up, perhaps this man was hired by us, but we didn't relay the information. But as I have said before, transparency in the electoral process is vital, especially at this moment.
Kevin Mutai, NTV in Mombasa.
We have said...
So that sets the context for this conversation, and we'll have other concerns that have been raised by the election observers group and ELOG. We have the national coordinator, Mulle Musau. These are crazy times, so I understand, you know, you're not being able to be here from 6:30 because you're watching every move of the IEBC and other stakeholders going into August 9th. So I understand you have late nights and very early mornings. So thank you for granting us this time in your busy schedule. From what has played out since the July 21st arrest of the Venezuelans who the IEBC has defended as having been contracted, people who are working for the IEBC and saying this is equal to jeopardizing or intimidating the election preparedness. What is your response sitting from ELOG's position?
First, Masai, thank you for having me. I must, of course, still nevertheless apologize for coming late. Because
at least you've apologized. You know people who don't.
I should, because I was supposed to be here at 6:30.
Yes.
But we are running a very hectic schedule.
I can
late night, like you said, early mornings, running all over the place. After this, you know, you're running all over the place. So,
yes.
But it's the season.
Yes.
The issue about IEBC, the saga at the airport, and the responses which I'm getting from the police. For me, I want to agree with Jack Tumwa that I think we are playing out, we are washing our dirty linen in public. Right. And I think we are over-scrutinizing IEBC. Yes, they have the onerous task of ensuring that we have credible elections in the next 10 days or so. But I think we are over-scrutinizing nearly every aspect of it, one. And secondly, the biggest problem, and I think we have raised this as election observers for quite some time, we don't seem to have a very good concert of all the actors in this process. IEBC cannot work alone. It has to work with the security apparatus, it has to work with the judiciary, it has to work with the communications authority if it's going to transmit the results. We need to see a well-coordinated process. IEBC will deliver, is expected to deliver on its mandate, but it must be supported adequately by all these other actors. So it does not really work very well for them and even for the nation when an issue which has been picked up at the airport is blown, in my view, out of proportion, because what I think, yes, there are sensitive materials. Right. Everything about election now is going to be over-scrutinized, actually, even as I say that we shouldn't do it. But there are ways that public authorities and government agencies, there are protocols that they use and they employ to ensure and shield some of these things from the public eye. Right. Our biggest problem in our elections is trust. So anything which creates suspicion, anything which creates, you know, feelings, untoward feelings of how the elections is going to be managed in the country, goes further to dampen the spirits of Kenyans and dampen the spirits of the voters who want to participate in the August in the elections.
Besides this dampening the spirits, there's the question of the integrity of the process. Yes. And whether it will be foolproof, beg your pardon. Yes, there's a lot of scrutiny, and now it'll even be even worse or better, depending on how you're looking at it, because people looking at the election, or this election, say we can't take any chances. But how badly damaged, in your view, is the integrity of the process? Because you have two players who are meant to be working together, especially before, during, and right after the election process and the election exercise. But they're talking at each other and throwing blame, defending their position. But what does this do when the IEBC refutes claims by the DCI and the DCI refutes claims by the IEBC, all wanting to come above this all and you know, be seen as the holders of the facts? The issue of the confidence. Why take part in this process if we feel that the waters have been murkied?
I'm calling this entire enterprise, which is going on, as the Pontius Pilate moment. Everybody wants to wash their hands. So you sit in your corner and you say, well, as far as I'm concerned, I was just doing my job. If you mess up everything else, that's your problem. And I think that's a very bad card to play now. Because we know, we have experience from the last 3 elections that things can go down, can go south in these elections. We have seen people die out of elections. There are expectations about what elections can deliver. And the electoral outcomes, the last 3 presidential elections have been heavily contested. And one of them actually historically nullified. Yes. You don't want to get yourself into those kind of problems, because it not only does it cloud the environment, but it creates unpredictable uncertainty. Yes. Of the entire process, and it escalates even the costs of elections. Because if you look at it from one point of view, if you're going to be going to court again because there are issues which people are picking up, or people are dissatisfied with the process, then you're nearly sure that somebody is going to run to court again. We're going to have disputed elections. We have to nearly redo a number of things. If you're told to rerun or to do another elections, it's expensive to the country. So we need to do, all the actors, especially the main actors, they need to be seen to be doing everything to ensure that we have a successful elections. No country in the world is going to promise you that they'll have elections which are unblemished. Right. No country in the world. Elections is a major logistical undertaking which has so many fine things from one process to the other. We are observers. We know we want to also pick with a toothpick, pick out all these issues. But you also must understand that these are all being conducted by Kenyans, by humans. There are going to be errors here and there. But there must be a process, a method to the madness about how you sort out the problems. Speaking of the madness, and it's getting even crazier, because 3 days ago, we see the Transnational Plaza, an office that is connected to the Deputy President, being raided by DCI officials. Did you connect the dots coming 2 days after the arrest of the Venezuelans at the JKIA, or would we be looking too much into this issue when we try to connect them? My perspective is usually a very easy one. I will remain a citizen. I don't want to overqualify myself in terms of seeing things very differently from what the ordinary citizen is seeing. If you raid the Transnational Plaza, and 2 days before you're talking about IEBC and the Venezuelans and materials which is coming to the country in an unauthorized fashion, every citizen in this country just thinks these things are connected. Right. I mean, that's how you look at it. And that's for me matters. I don't want to go beyond that. We can go beyond that and try to get very professional about it. But that is what matters, because if people connect those dots and start seeing that, then somebody starts saying, witch hunt, something happening. And that is what matters, because we're talking about perceptions and we're talking about lack of trust. So I think there must be, that's what I'm saying, that method to the madness needs to be there. If the police must investigate something, let them investigate it. Okay. We have no problem with them doing their job, but they must do it in a manner. I for one, if I found out there were unauthorized documents coming through the airport, I would call Chebukati, and I'd call Chebukati to account what is going on in a discreet manner, because I do not want to send the wrong signals. Okay. We would settle it. If we cannot settle it between the two agencies, cannot be able to settle, for instance, an issue like that in the airport, then now somebody can go to court, or they can escalate the matter again in a manner that allows for discreetness, so that we all remain focused on the delivery of an elections. But when it spills out, you get a feeling people want this to spill out. So yes. people want this to be seen out there. Granted, we also wanted transparency in the process. Of course, one of the things which also is coming through from this process is questions. We start asking questions. For instance, okay, these stickers, IEBC has called them non-strategic materials, but just stickers. We have printers in Kirinyaga Road. We have local printers here. Just stickers. Why do we need to import them? We're also thinking Why get them? We are running one of the most expensive elections in the country. So there are things which emerge because of your lack of discreetness. So we start asking ourselves, but even for printers, we can have them done around. Right. For stickers, we can have them printed around. If it's just labeling Kim's kits. So you unravel so many things which we never needed first to know. Yes. But which now we must ask, because now it's all in the open. Then we also start now looking at the finer details again. And I don't know whether that is also adds to the value in terms of adequate preparations or adequate focus to the delivery of a credible election. Again, whether you'll respond to this as ELOG National Coordinator, an election observer, or as an, a part of the electorate, or just Mwananchi, do you see this, the theatrics, an effort by someone, whoever it is, to discredit the IEBC, or is it a distraction from something else? Let me speak first as myself, because I don't want to qualify ELOG for this. I think you can see ulterior motives. You read ulterior motives where people decide to get out of line. Yes. Because that's, for me, this is something which has gotten out of line. This is not the way government agencies work and operate together. Between Chiloba and Chebukati, for instance, when it comes to matters of transmission of results, they must have their back channel engagement in terms of is everything enabled? Is the landscape, the infrastructure enabled so that you can be able to do this? When we ever see, if you see a public spat between them, we raise eyebrows. If we see a public spat between, remember earlier this year, the IG and Chebukati launched an election security plan. It was a public document. It was consumed by people. It indicated that these were agencies which are willing to work together. You get out of that arrangement, because there must be an arrangement that they have. If there are protocols, for instance, as DCI was saying, which are supposed to be followed by IEBC, you would expect them to ask each other those questions. And how come you never notified me of this? You don't say this through the media. You don't say this through the public. You ask each other those questions and you sort them out. So the minute you see anything getting out of line, and we are talking about an event which is happening 2 weeks to an election, then you must ask yourself, are there ulterior motives? Okay, so that's Mulle Musau speaking. That's Mulle Musau speaking. As ELOG National Coordinator, has there been effort to engage these stakeholders, whether it's the DCI or the IEBC, from your end, telling them stand down or manage this better? We have, our leadership has called on the chair. We have spoken to the chair in terms of how to handle some of these issues. Today, later in the day, we are having a meeting with the commission. So we have pushed on to have even a meeting to be able to discuss these issues further. Okay. The day before yesterday, the religious leaders who are part of our group issued a statement in which they're also condemning the manner in which these matters are being handled. We were there to give our advice in terms of what communication needs to be there. So we are trying as much as possible to also pacify the environment, because we need sobriety in these last few days. If you don't push these actors then to act in concert, or even to act with decorum, because even decorum is part of the issue, then you create anxiety in the public. And we'll go to an election where everybody believes, or everybody looks at everything suspiciously. We are doing digital identification, which is still controversial. People go to the stations. Our records show that less than 15% of the voting population went to inspect the voter registers. Now, if they never inspected those voter registers, then you walk into that station and you find that your name is missing, you start thinking Venezuela. You start thinking Lycos. You start thinking transmission. You have so many things you can poke at and say, this is the reason why my name is not in this. Yes. And you can create a fiasco out of the entire election as a result. And you're mentioning some of the concerns that I'd want us to play back here, and I believe my director, Jackie, will open the lines to people in a moment. But I want to play the concerns that were raised on the July the 22nd by some of your colleagues in ELOG on issues to do with vote tallying,
voter register, and the full KPMG report being made available and publicized, and the training of poll officials. So let's listen in and then see from your list what is top of your concerns.
As ELOG remain concerned that IEBC used a smaller sample of 580 out of 46,233 polling stations, which is not representative enough to depict the real picture of the challenges that could occur in the transmission of results from all polling stations. We therefore appeal to the Commission in the spirit of transparency and in compliance with the principles of open data to immediately release the report.
Noting that this is an opportunity to have Kenyans engage in the electoral processes beyond just being voters and politicians. Due diligence should also be taken by IEBC to ensure that we do not get polling officials who are openly partisan.
That was on July 22nd. You definitely were privy to that and the concerns you have raised. And 5 days on, what's top of your list? Let's say the top 3 concerns and what you're telling the IEBC to sort out.
Number one, now because you've talked about materials, I think the question of strategic materials and the integrity around all that must be sorted out because, well, IEBC has already disqualified the stickers as strategic materials. I also think it's not really strategic, but we have ballot papers. For instance, I think the presidential ballot papers are coming in today. Now we need to ensure that there is storage, that there is security, and that the distribution of those ballot papers around across the country. Remember, we're just about 10 days. There are 46,000. I think they have revised the number of polling stations to 46,229, not 33. I think 4 or so stations, I think they've been cancelled out. They've been merged into one. So we need now to see the security and the integrity around that process. That's key. The other key issue right now is the question of the recruitment and the training of polling officials.
You feel it's not up to par or to the level you'd expect at this point?
What you want them is to take, conduct due diligence. We seem to forget a very crucial aspect of the elections, and which has been amplified very many times, that the results of the polling stations are final. What does that say? That takes out Chebukati, that takes out the commission itself. It leaves our elections at the hand of about 7 officials or 8 officials in a polling station. So now we need that process of the recruitment and the training to be above board. Get right people. Ideally, we are supposed to get the most local of the people around the polling station to be able to administrate over that process. The PO, the polling clerks are supposed to be basically locals so that they can be able to run an election understanding the environment in which they are doing that election. But those results that they announce, if they have any integrity problems and you do not ensure that you have the right people, then we are cooked as a country because that's where the elections are.
Speaking of the right people, there's the issue of how objective they are. You've said they need to be from the local community.
Yes.
How objective they are in the process to look beyond the popularity of whichever candidate and the wave and the mood around them to stick to the facts.
And that's what I'm talking about in terms of, there are about 420 or thereabouts, 420,000 Kenyans who are going to be employed by the IEBC to work in the different spaces, but especially at the polling station. So we over the years, we've questioned the integrity of some of these officials. Do they do any vetting at that level? At the level of recruitment, do they do vetting? Do they ask, for instance, for references from the local community to be able to check? Because the locals know who is an Azimio person and who is Kenya Kwanza person. So you don't want the locals to feel that this election in my local primary school is being supervised by a person we know is totally Kenya Kwanza damu, ama Wajakoya damu, or you don't want that kind of perception, because if you create that perception at the local level and then you say these are the results, which are the polling stations, they'll tell you, we know the person who was in charge, and this is Kenya. We know how things are. It is the big people who call the shots. So the PO must have called the shots in terms of the kind of returns and outcomes that we are getting in these polling stations.
Tell you what, Mulle,
yes.
My director calls the shots at this moment. She says we take a break.
Okay.
That is my IEBC for this particular exercise. But you've mentioned strategic materials and the need to make sure that they're safe, and recruitment, training of officials above board.
Yes.
We'll get to the other concerns top of your list as ELOG as we count down 12 days to the elections. Stay with AM Live.
The Communications Authority of Kenya, CA, regulates the broadcasting industry, promoting development of local content and ensuring responsible use of broadcasting platforms for national good. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
Here at Kitale Club, this is where it all started. This has been my home club where I was brought up, and I'm really happy to come back home. Just to take you back on how this journey began, is that my father introduced me to this game. Then I became a caddy here. After becoming a caddy, there were tournaments that were set for us to compete. I remember my first tournament that I played, I became number 3. From that position, I decided to take it seriously because I had the thirst to win a tournament. Some of the moments I cherish about Kitale Golf Club is that, number 1, they gave me a golf course to use, and number 2, they gave me the opportunity to become a caddy here. And number 3 is that the members here were really willing to see that one of their own and doing better outside. Giving back to the club is that I've promised that I will be coming here to conduct clinics on behalf of the members, just to inspire the kids, to let them know that that this game is doable and it's wonderful, because this is a home of golf. Many champions have been brought up from this Kitale Club.
Unapohisi maumivu, unahitaji kitulizo kinachotegemeka. Jaribu Panadol Advance. Ikitumia teknolojia Panadol Optizorb, tembe hiyo hufyonzwa haraka na kuandaa kitulizo cha haraka dhidi ya maumivu. Jaribu Panadol Advance.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mrs. Jessie Bosire.
I'm sorry, no more weddings for today. You can book for another day.
Please, can you just let us in, even just for 2 minutes? I've waited for so long to marry this man. And waiting one more day is just too unbearable.
Get peace of mind and protect the ones you love with the power of Dettol Bar Soap. It cleans and protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. So no matter what type of mum you are, trust Dettol.
Mama Stevo, where are the kids?
I think they're upstairs doing their revision.
Oh, you guys are here. Maria and Steve, which revision papers are you doing today?
Baba, mimi nashughulikia maswali ya marudio ya somo la Kiswahili kutoka kwa gazeti la Taifa Leo.
Na wewe?
I am working on the mathematics revision paper from the Junior Sport magazine of the Daily Nation.
Wow, this is wonderful. Are the revision papers from Taifa Leo and Daily Nation working for you guys?
Yes, Dad. Wanauliza maswali yao kwa njia nzuri na nyepesi sana.
And the questions are in tandem with our syllabus.
Dear parents, invest in Taifa Leo and Junior Sport for KCPE and KCSE revision papers. Kwa maswali ya gazeti la Taifa Leo, usiugose uhondo huo kila Jumatatu hadi Jumamosi. In our Junior Sport, it's every Monday. Do not miss out.
Welcome back to AM Live. We're talking to the Election Observers Group National Coordinator, Mulle Musau. He, just before we took a break, outlined two concerns on his list, top concerns on his list: strategic materials, election materials having to be secured. No question about it, especially with what has played out in the last 7 days with the foreigners being arrested with some stickers, and as well as recruitment and training of officials to be above board. Third on your list of 5. Let's make it 5.
Yeah, so third is the voter register. And we raised this also in our statement that we have, the IEBC was required 60 days to the election to be able to certify the voter register. We got the report, at the same time they got the report from the KPMG on the audit of that voter register. They gave us a summary of the register in respect to issues which have been raised by KPMG. So two things. One, we have not yet gotten the final KPMG report because it is important that you share with stakeholders what then the report was, the full report. Okay. And secondly is the final register, because once IEBC is handed over this report, it was required to clean the register. You clean the register and then you avail it. They have given us truncated copies of different places, but we have not seen the comprehensive register. If it's been available, I don't think I've been privy to it.
So hang on, the one that we have of about 22.1 million, that's not...
No, that's a register.
Yes.
But you see, when an audit over that register raises concerns, it raises issues about errors, which could be in the register. Now, you want that to be cleaned out, and IEBC actually did report to the public that they were in the process of cleaning. Now, we needed to get the final register, one that now nothing changes. There was an inspection period where the public also were able to scrutinize the register on their own, and then there's a KPMG audit. So what they do is that they give you give recommendations on what needs to be cleaned out, what needs to be. There may be duplicate names. There could be this. So we've not gotten that final. We have the final number of the registered voters, but some of them could be duplicates. Some of them could be, there could be errors in terms of some of they call computer. If you do logical tests in any data, you may realize there are quite a number of things which must be removed for it to have some level of integrity. Otherwise, somebody can, for instance, you can use your ID, those alphanumerics, you can go to the KIMS kit, where it was supposed to be a 0, it is an O.
Yes.
And then you can't be then recognized through that. So you have to remove all those small issues so that you can have a final register. So we need some clarity if IEBC have shared it or they have finalized on this, because I remember the last time they were being asked by the media, they said we are going to share not only the final register, but also with the matrix, which shows what we cleaned.
And I hope you bring that up because you say you're meeting the IEBC commissioners later on today. And on that point, 2 weeks ago, you've just mentioned it, in first, the IEBC chair and CEO had a roundtable with media, with reporters, top reporters from across the board. And the question was put to Chebukati on how the deputy president, one of the major presidential candidates, found out and knew about the transfer of, in his figures, close to 1 million voters being transferred, yet that coming to be validated by a report that was given. And Chebukati didn't quite give the strongest or the firmest of answers. Let's see how it played out.
On the 2nd of June, the deputy president and the Kenya Kwanza presidential candidate, William Ruto, said that a number of his voters, about 1 million of them, had been moved from their polling stations to other polling stations. And in fact, the IEBC confirmed weeks later by even gazetting those places that they perceived the votes to have been moved, although you scale down the numbers from the 1.1 million. The question is this is a player in this election. How did the team for Deputy President William Ruto know that his voters, not just voters being moved, said his supporters have been moved from one location to the other? This was before the KPMG report. This was before even you spoke about the register. How did they know this happened, Chairman?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. I don't know how they knew, Maybe that question should be addressed to the Deputy President who came up with the statement. But what I do know is that we had the KPMG report, and the recommendations of that report, including the issue you are raising about the transfers, came as a result of that report. And that's how then we address the issues after that. So how that information then was available to the candidate for Kenya Kwanza, I don't know.
But then, Chairman,
yeah.
The problem with this is this. This is a candidate in this election. You don't know how they knew. There are people who have access to your system. Do you think this information came from your system? Because you confirmed it later through even the KPMG report that indeed there are voters who had been moved. The concern, however, is not even about the voters. How he knew his voters were moved. Does it bother you that a candidate would have such details that later is confirmed by a report?
Let's put it this way. The information of 1 million is not correct. So let's start from there. So if we start from there, then we can say that if the information is not correct, then why are we worried about that information? Maybe perhaps the only thing we can talk about now is the fact that there was some cases of movement of transfers, which were very, very few cases. I think there were less than 5,000 cases. So if you look at that with the 1 million movement, you see, we are talking about two different things here.
Mulle Musau ameshika tama. Sijui if it's you're not. Were you content with the response there by the IEBC chair?
I think Mijungu did not get to the point, in my view. The chair answered as he should, because when you ask me how did somebody know about this information, right. I'll ask you, maybe you need to go and ask that person how they got the information. But there are two crucial issues. Number one is that there was a transfer of votes. Now, that's a serious issue. That's a fact.
The CEO has said transfers do happen. It is
no. The chair said that there was transfer, yes. which they had a report on and which they worked on. And remember, he went on to say even 3 officials of IEBC were implicated and arrested. So that's a critical issue. That's the core issue, if you ask me, because it basically says then there is opportunity or there is possibility of moving people without the proper protocols being followed. That is a crucial. That's what I'm saying. Mijungu should have concentrated not on who told the deputy. You know, we are dealing with a very peculiar environment for these elections. We have what we would call a competition between incumbents. We have the deputy president on one side, we have Raila on the other side, but who is also backed by the president. So these are incumbents, all of them. That's a peculiarity of it. So they all are, if you want to, if I should say so, system people. Yep. I mean, people are being employed. The IBC employs people. Most of them, they go through the public service and all those things. Some of them are relative to some of the, we know how some of these things go in terms of employment in this country. So access to information within IBC by a politician of such senior ranking, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I think it's possible. It's an everyday thing. The question is, we do have, and so I'm following up on the issue of the leak. Well, if there is not a leak, but the change, if that change is possible, first it means there are integrity problems in terms of the staffing. So you can extend the question of vetting from the field POs and other people to even the internal staff of IBC, because you have seen a breach. That breach means there's a problem inside the commission that also must be sorted out. Yes. And secondly, there are systems which also need to be checked, which was going to be my fourth point in terms of the things that IBC has to deal with, critical issues, system checks, whether it's technology, whether it's the transmission process, because we have seen a number of issues about that. And therefore we need Smartmatic and the team around it, the consultants who are helping IBC with the technology. In the next few days before that election happens, they must continually do system checks to ensure no breaches of such occur. All right. And then when it comes to the staff, just one thing, the code of conduct, because all IBC staff must sign a code of conduct and a pledge of neutrality, because they need to be, just like observers, they cannot be seen to be biased or to have prejudices. So again, we must again see that if we have already given an indication that there could be breach and some of these people are going against this, one, action must be taken, but we also must again vet them.
Okay. I just want to interject here and give an opportunity to a viewer, Madenge from Mombasa County 001. Good morning, Madenge. What's your question to Mr. Mulle Musau?
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Okay, maybe napenda kuzungumza Kiswahili because I don't everybody to understand. Mimi nilikuwa na swali yangu ni nini? Kwa nini tutakuwa tunaendelea kupoteza maisha ya watu katika every 5 years kwa sababu ya election? Na kwa sababu kuna mtu ambaye anasimamia election na anaitwa Chebukati. Na kwa nini tunaendelea kila wakati wa 5 years tunamfundisha kazi yake kwa media, tunamwambia angefanya hivi na anakula mshahara wa sisi ambao sisi ni wa taxpayers. Kwa nini yeye hawezi kujirekebisha na akawa anajua ni kazi yake? Kwa sababu kila mtu anajua kazi yake katika Kenya hii na ile section amepewa. Ningeomba afikirie sana, na kama haitakuwa hivyo, ukiendelea kupoteza maisha namna hii, yeye ndiye atakuwa responsible, kwa sababu yeye ndiye anasababisha maisha ya watu kupotea. Asante.
Mulle Musau, I'm not sure if you heard it clearer than I. Asante Madenge, we have a bit of a different setup this morning, and if you hear the question there from Madenge, did you hear it clearly?
Well, I think his question is basically asking why Chebukati, from what I hear, is a question of Chebukati and his responsibility to ensure that we have he conducts his work in terms of managing the elections above board, something like that. Yes. That he does, he should be aware of his responsibilities.
And how this plays out in the media, I believe I caught that.
Yes, and delivering credible elections to the country. I mean, I get the sentiments in terms of we get worried every 5 years. We are asking ourselves every 5 years, we have to come to a near halt in this country so that we can be able to dispense off with the elections. Yes. And then there are misgivings about how the management is being undertaken by IEBC or by other actors. Right. So it's a question. It's a genuine question from Kenyans. They would not want. I mean, the person that they see, and I think we've spoken to the chair a number of times. The person that they see is the chair. They don't see. These other actors are, I would call them sideshows when it comes to an elections. Whether it is the IG, yes, he has a supporting cast. Whether it's the DCI, the main man right now, the most important person in this country is Chebukati. So his posture, how he relays information, the level of openness and transparency that he espouses as he undertakes a very onerous and very difficult task is going to be crucial for Kenyans. So just Kenya, I think that's a simple question of a Kenyan who is worried that things are not being done the right way according to them, and they would want to see a much more stoic, a much more, confident, posture from the Commission by all means, in terms of managing.
By all means, and I'm not holding brief for the IEBC, if they do feel intimidated or that the process is being interfered with, they should speak out.
They should. Yes. They should. Again, that's one of the issues about openness and even confidence is also calling out those people who are creating problems. I have no problem with Chebukati saying there's somebody who is doing something to me in terms of disparaging the work that we are working, the things that we are working in terms of preparations. But can it be done in a manner that it is very clear? And in fact, one of the things that ELOG has spoken to the Commission about is that where you don't get funding, for instance, over the years, the Commission would make noise about not getting enough funds. Yes. Some of the preparations, even this issue of the voter registration process, we should not be having very late registrations, but the IEBC does not get enough funding in between, in the non-election years. They should call Parliament out and tell them, well, you're not allocating money to us. Yes. They should call out the police if security is not being provided. Remember the by-elections in last year? There was a lot of breach of security, and ELOG even gave a statement saying that the police needed to do their job. So he has every right to call out any actor who is not supporting, but he must also do it in a manner that espouses confidence, so that we know they have done their bit. Now it is these other actors who are letting him down, and he's reaching out to them. He's also appealing to them, even in back channels, to ensure that the work, the election is managed. Ultimately, it's managed in a above board. On above board basis.
Here's something before we run out of time that I know caught your radar, and it was raised on July 6th this year. And Raila basically saying, in short, if there's no manual voter register, there will be no election. This is part of a report that was done by Melita Oletenges. Just to give some context, we'll get a response.
A week after the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition presidential candidate Raila Odinga met the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and raised concerns on why the electoral body announced that it will only use the electronic voter identification and not the physical register, Odinga has today issued an ultimatum that the manual register must be used alongside the electronic register, failure to which the Azimio coalition shall not participate in the elections.
Manual register is a must at each and every polling station. This is not negotiable. You're telling the IEBC they must have a manual register along with biometric identification of the voters on that polling day. Kabla hivyo hakuna uchaguzi.
The declaration by Odinga comes against the backdrop of a fierce accusation by the Azimio Council Secretary General Junet Mohamed against Ford Kenya party leader Moses Wetangula on claims of a conspiracy to rig the elections by the Kenya Kwanza Alliance in cahoots with the printing company tasked with printing the ballot papers.
Mulipanga ballot papers itoke huko Greece, zingine ikuje hapa, zingine ipelekwe huko Uganda. Tena mfanye huko ballot marking huko Uganda, tena mupitishe kwa boda ya Bungoma, tena mulete hapa ndio uweke kwa ballot paper. Unafikiri sisi ni wajinga bani? Unafikiri sisi ni wajinga? Sisi tumeshajua mpango yenu yote. Ndio maana sasa lazima Wakenya wajue vile mmepanga kuiba kura.
Ati wamechagua polling stations kama 10,000. Pale ambapo wataweza kuingiza hizo kura 200 ili ingie pale ndio wapate kura 2,000,000 ya ili ya ziada ya uongo.
And that was a little over a month to the D-Day. Time has gone by after that. I think the IEBC has pronounced itself on some of the issues, especially about the manual register being a last resort. They'll be able to fall back to it. But you know, from where you sit, has that been settled, the concerns?
I always say this: if you're asking the question, it's not been settled, because that's why you're discussing it, and I think that forms actually the last point in terms of the 5 critical issues that we need to settle. Number one, I think, largely from a formal point of view, I think the issue has been settled because IEBC did call the presidential candidate. They did sit together, they agreed, and then IEBC was very clear in terms of the process of the manual register is going to be present there, but it's a last resort, like you've just said. Now, which brings me to the last issue that we need to handle, because that's part of it. So IEBC needs to really clarify the E-Day operations, the procedures which are going to happen on E-Day, even in terms of, number one, the register which is going to be available, the procedures, because now you've created a process. When you say it's a last resort, you're saying there are a number of things that we have had. We have had that it's going to be a digital identification process. Yes. If that fails, we're going to have an alphanumeric identification. If that fails, we have heard that another kit could be brought in if the kit failed. And if that fails, we know that there's a manual register that we're supposed to be falling back to. That process needs to be very clear, as is the rest of the voting day operations, which include the transmission at the end of the day, which has its own issues. Because we're still not very clear, number one, how live streaming will be enabled by the issue of the transfer of images from the different polling stations. IEBC, I think in a number of meetings, they've said that they shall provide the media, they shall provide agents, even observers, back-end access to the information, the portal that allows them to scrape those results so they can be able to tabulate. I think that process needs to be very clear so that we all know this is a procedure and this is what is going to be happening on E-Day. So the clarity of the E-Day for me, because now we are now focused on E-Day, needs to come out more, and they need to speak about it so that it settles everybody's anxieties over what is going to happen from one process to the other.
All right, for someone who's just catching us at the tail end, we're wrapping this up. You have 5 main concerns as the Election Observer Group, ELOG, as the national coordinator. You're meeting the IEBC later today. We could give them a leakage of what you'll be telling them. Just go through it as you answer this other question. Should Kenyans be worried about any flare-ups, violence related from where you sit?
Our reports indicate that if you compare this process to the 2017 process and the 2013 process, we are much more quieter. The campaign process has actually been very low-key.
Okay.
That's a good sign. But it's a dangerous sign when you also contrast it to some of the other reports which indicate that social media is awash with now everything else.
Yes.
There is a lot of disinformation, there's a lot of hate speech which is going on in those spaces. Does that indicate there could be a flare-up? Possibly, but it's a space that you must watch very, very closely. What we know and what we have advised is that we have 2 camps which are very ready in terms of every issue. I think there's a very high possibility that we're going to have a disputed election because both camps have been collecting evidence. I remember they only have 14 days to present this evidence to the Supreme Court for there to be a petition. So I think both camps and all actors now have learned that if you don't wait until the election day. So I think both camps have been collecting evidence. Chances somebody has already enough evidence to be able to present to the Supreme Court pending whatever other things which will happen on E-Day. Okay. So I think there's a possibility that there could be tensions. They need to be handled. I think agencies like NCIC are working around the clock to ensure that they pacify also the environment in terms of dealing with a number of issues. So it's a concern, but the reports don't indicate that there could be major flare-ups.
All right.
As things stand.
Okay. Yeah. Bwana Mulle Musau, I know I promised to go through the 5, top 5 concerns that you have on your list as ELOG heading into E-Day, you call it, not even D-Day. But how else are we going to get views when we upload this episode? Go through the episode. You'll find the 5 concerns that Bwana Mulle Musau has raised. But it'll also be part of our news today because you're meeting the IEBC later on. Yes. Some of their officials are headed to the airport to receive another batch of ballot papers. We'll see how that plays out and also make sure we accommodate the concerns that you have raised. Thank you for your time and all the best as you keep a keen eye on this issue. We need you and many more like you to make sure that it is as foolproof as possible. We're transitioning now to Your World with Winnie Lubembe, and she's talking about the use of play-based initiatives to improve performance in schools. So I'll hand it over at this point. As Mark Masai will say, have yourself a good day. And I'll tell my daughter, Nashipa, who's probably watching, she's going to play school. Finish your porridge, head to school, don't disturb auntie. And perhaps you can watch a bit of how play-based initiatives can improve performance in schools. Have a beautiful day.